All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin another beautiful daf of Kesuvos ahead of us today. Begin by thanking our sponsors, our TORAH sponsors. Shmuel Leba Dinovitz for dedicating all the Shurman Drushos this month in the zechus of an aliyah for the neshama of Shmuel's father, HaRav Peretz Avraham, Harav Benyamin Moshe, we hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, the neshama will have an aliyah and the family a neshama. Both say today's daf is daf test. We have a little bit of catch up to do. We left off on daf ches amud beis 8b at the first of the wide lines, not the widest lines, the intermediate lines. So I should say the first line after the end of the short lines. Okay, if that's helpful. All right, it's about the middle of that. So let's just remember again, we left off in the middle of a pretty dramatic story where the Gemara was telling us that Rav Chia bar Abba lost a child. He lost a child. There's a machlokes. Did he lose a very young child? Was his son a young man? And he was the Rebbe. He was the Rebbe of Reish Lakish's sons. So Reish Lakish goes with his Turkaman Yehuda to pay a Shiva visit. And remember again, it's interesting, they get there and Reish Lakish says to Yehuda, essentially offers some words of consolation. So we saw that interesting consolation that Yehuda offered, and the story, we're still in the middle of the story. So the Gemara goes right to Amarle, Kum Ema Milsa Keneged Shvachu Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Reish Lakish tells Yehuda, go and say something in praise of the Ribono Shel Olam. And I will say, what does this have to do with Nichum Avelim? Right? Remember again, they're at a Shiva visit. So why is Abaye instructing? Reish Lakish. Why is Reish Lakish instructing his Turgaman Yehuda to go ahead and say Shevach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Because Rabbi say one of the things that we are instructed to do in the midst of loss is to go ahead and accept that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, and to recognize on some level that everything that Hashem does is for the good. So in the midst of this tragic loss, Reish Lakish instructs Yehuda to go ahead and share some words of praise about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amarle, Va'amar. So what does Yehuda say? So Yehuda gets up and he says, Va'amar, Hagodl Birov Godlo. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is great in his greatness, Adir v'chazak. Again, I will say, we said this yesterday, that's what is about Lashon HaKodesh, is that you have words that all translate the same way. Adir v'chazak, great and strong. Berov no ra'os, mechaye mesim ma'amaro. He brings back the dead with his words. O segidolos adein cheker. He does incredible things beyond comprehension. V'neflaos adein mispar. And wondrous things beyond count. Baruch atah Hashem mechaye hamesim. So I will say, so again, just to point out, we do this contemporarily a little bit different at a Levaya. We have something called Tziduk Hadin. Tziduk Hadin is the acceptance of judgment. And it's a paragraph that the Avelim say. And the essence of the paragraph is summed up in the phrase, Hashem nasan, Hashem lakach, Yehi Shem Hashem bevorach. Hashem has given, Hashem has taken. The name of Hashem should be blessed. The job of a Jew is the ability to say thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to recognize the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to accept the judgments of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even in the midst of difficult times. That's what Reish Lakish was driving at over here. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amarle, Reish Lakish then says to Yehuda, this is beautiful, Kum Eima Milsa Keneged Avelim. Go and say something to the Avelim. Right? In other words, so now you've said something about the loss, you've said something about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Say something, speak to the dynamic of the Avelim. So I will say, this is by the way, you see why this guy Yehuda had job security. Because he's this stuff, like just understand, sometimes you get asked to speak share a few words. And okay, so if you're a person who speaks often, maybe it's not such a big deal, but Lamaisa, it's very, to be put on the spot to say something. So it's incredible that over here, Yehuda is being put on the spot by Reish Lakish, and again, being asked to share all of this profundity. So, say something about the Avelim. Pasach va'amar, he opened up and he said, Achenu, listen to how beautiful this is. Achenu hamiyugain be'evel. Our brethren ultimately again who are downtrodden and overwhelmed by this loss. Tinu levavchem lachkor as zos. Think about and contemplate the following. Listen to what he writes. Zos hi omedes la'ad. This which you are experiencing is for eternity. For eternity. Nesivus, in other words, what's happening over here is Yehuda is speaking about the dynamic of death. And he's saying the dynamic of death is one that has been in this world forever. Nesivhu misheshes emei bereishes. It is a pathway paved from the beginning of creation. Rabim shasu, rabim yishtu. Many have drunk. Right, many have drunk, right, from its waters. Rabim yishtu. Many will drink from its waters. The Gemara says, Rabim yishtu kimishta rishonim kach mishta achronim. The same way that the earlier ones have drunk of this, the latter ones will as well. So almost like the idea that what's happening over here, so ultimately Yehuda describing the dynamic of death as one that is here since the beginning of time. This is part of the passage of life. I would say sometimes we go through life being so scared of death, overwhelmed by death. What Yehuda is saying is one has to embrace the dynamic of death as part of the cycle of life. It is part of the fabric of creation. He goes on, he says, Achinu ba'al nechamas, so Achinu ba'al nechamas yinachim eschem, my brethren, the ba'al nechamas, he who is the master of all consolation, should console you. Baruch menachem avelim. Beautiful, beautiful. Amar Abaye says back, Rabim shasu lema, Rabim yishtu lo lema. So Abaye corrects. Abaye corrected Yehuda. I guess Abaye was there, right? Abaye corrected Yehuda, and he said, you could say Rabim shasu. You could say many have drunk from it. Don't say many will drink. Mishta rishonim lema. You could say it is the drink of the earlier ones. Mishta achronim lo lema. Don't say it's the drink of the later ones. Why not? I will say, what's wrong with saying this is incredible? Damar Shem and Lakish, because I will say, Reish Lakish himself. I just want to point out just the circle over here, right? This is Yehuda, the Turgaman of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish himself said, in the name of Rabbi Yossi, the Olam al yiftach adam pivla satan. A person should not go ahead and open up his mouth to the Satan, which I will say means what? A person should not speak about the possibility of misfortune occurring. So I will say, so this is actually interesting. So I just want to point out what's happening over here. Is you have Yehuda the Turgaman. So you have remember, they're going ahead and they're there to pay a Shiva visit. Right? Reish Lakish says to his Turgaman, say something to the Avelim. Say something to the Avelim. So here I will say, so Yehuda comes along and speaks about the dynamic of death. And what is he essentially doing? He's saying to the Avelim, what you're going through, as painful, as uniquely painful as it feels for you, is part of the fabric of the human condition. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful words. Abaye says, don't speak, I understand if you want to talk about death as a historical reality, don't speak about the fact that everyone is going to experience death in the future. Don't do that. That's al yiftach pivla satan. Don't go ahead and open up your mouth and discuss about the potential of misfortune. Before we get into that dynamic, I will say, so why does Yehuda say it? Because I will say, Yehuda will say, this is not an opening up my mouth to the Satan. Why not? Why not? Because I will say, death is a reality. Al yiftach pivla satan means, do not go ahead and speak about the potential of misfortune that may or may not occur. The whole point that Yehuda was trying to say is that death is part of the fabric of life, and it is an unavoidable consequence of the human condition. All right, anyway, Abaye comes along and says, don't speak about Yiftach Pevla Satan. Mikra, what's the pasuk? So, Kistom Hayinu La Mora Daminu. So, this is very interesting. The Gemara quotes the pasuk from Yeshaya. So the pasuk from Yeshaya says, Lole Hashem tzavakos hosilanu. Klal Yisrael says, Hashem, had you not spared us, we would have suffered the plight of Sdom and Amorah. Sdom and Amorah, of course, are the cities that are destroyed. Right after that, what does Yeshayahu say to the Jewish people? Maya hadrale, Shimok divar Hashem kitzine Sdom. We'll say right after that, Yeshaya calls the people the princes of Sdom. In other words, so the people say we would have been destroyed like stone. You know what? Then Akash Baruch Hu says, you know what? Now that you're talking about stone, you guys are kind of sodomite-like in your behaviors, right? So you see from here that Al Tiftach Pela Satan. Don't go ahead and make reference to the potential for misfortune to occur. I will say, by the way, sometimes you see what this means, because sometimes people misapply this. People often think Al Tiftach Pela Satan means that you can't speak about any potential misfortune because then it may occur. So that's superstitious, right? That's kind of like the misunderstanding of Ayin Hara. Al Tiftach Pela Satan means that I will say the way it works in this world is that each of us has like a file cabinet of Averas. Let's be honest. Halavai, it's only one, right? But right, even that one might have like five levels. Right? So we'll say, so what happens? In general, what we say is Chalash Baruch Hu loves us, so he keeps the file cabinet closed. Don't do stuff in life that causes HaKadosh Baruch Hu to open up the file cabinet. So that's what's happening over here. Klal Yisrael makes a reference. We were almost destroyed like Sodom and Amorah. Hey, why bring up Sodom and Amorah? Then once they do it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says the truth is, guys, you're actually not so far off from Sodom and Amorah. That's Al Tiftach Pela Satan. It's almost the same dynamic as Ayin Hara. Don't go ahead and behave in ways that causes HaKadosh Baruch Hu to closely look at and investigate your shortcomings and failures. It's beautiful. Now, Reish Lakish says to Yehuda, say something beautiful corresponding to the people who come to be Menachem Avel. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Pasach va'amar, this is so beautiful. Achenu gom lechasadim elei gom lechasadim hamachzikim beviso shel Avraham Avinu. So Yehuda gets up and he says, my brethren, achenu, my brethren, gom lechasadim, those who do chesed, the sons of those who do chesed, who go ahead and hold on to the bris of Avraham Avinu. Now, both say this is actually very beautiful. We often think of the bris of Avraham Avinu as what? Bris Milah. Look at Rashi. This is so beautiful. Avram shegamal chasadim dichsiv vayita eshel rashi tebos achila shtia levaya or lina. So let's say, what's the real bris of Avraham Avinu? The real bris of Avraham Avinu was chesed. Chesed. Avraham Avinu was kulo chesed, all the time. So ultimately, again, those who do chesed are holding on to the bris of Avraham Avinu. Achinu bal hagomel yishalem lechem gmulchem baruch atah mishalem hagmul. My brethren, the one bal hagmul, the one who goes ahead and controls all reward, yishalem lechem gmulchem, should reward you for all of your chesed. Baruch atah mishalem hagmul. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Amalei. So Yehuda's on a roll over here, right? So Reish Lakish says, Amalei, Kum Eima Milsa Kineged Kol Yisrael. Give a bracha to all of Klal Yisrael. Pasach va'amar. Rabbi say Ches Amud Beis, about 8 lines up from the bottom. Pasach va'amar. Ribona olamim. Pedei v'hatzel malei toshes amcha Yisrael min hadever. So Rabbi says, listen to this. So Yehuda gets up and he says, Ribona olamim, Master of the universe, redeem and save and spare your nation Yisrael from dever, pestilence, cherev, war or sword, biza, plundering, shidafon, yerakon, drought, blight, mikol paronios, hamisrakshos, ubaos laolam. From any misfortune was going to come into the world. Tara mikra va'atos sana, Kadosh Baruch Hu, before they call out, may you be able to answer, Baruch atah otzer hamagefa. Incredible. Amr Ula. So I will say, I just want to point out, by the way, you know what else? You see something very important from here, which is, when in a base Avel, a person should only be speaking meaningful things. You know, we'll say, we spoke about this before, we saw Moed Cotton. People sometimes think when they go to pay a Shiva visit, that it's their job to distract the Avel, the job to distract the mourner. So you hear people speak about the most inane things. So first of all, number one, you're not going to distract the Avel. When a person has suffered a loss, no matter what small talk you're going to make, you're not going to distract them from their loss. And furthermore, that's not the point of Shiva. The point of Shiva is to be steeped in your loss. The point of Shiva is to truly process your loss. And you see from here, again, Rish Lakish is coming into the base of El. I'll tell you something interesting. What's missing from this exchange over here? What's missing from this entire exchange? Right? There's no exchange. Right? Who's silent this entire time? Rav Chia bar Abba. Which is interesting. Now, maybe he wasn't silent. The Gemara is just telling us one side of the exchange. But what's interesting is it's also possible he lost a child. A traumatic, overwhelming loss. It's also possible that he has absolutely nothing to say. So when he has nothing to say, you have Reish Lakish telling Yehuda, give brachas. Just give brachas and let's leave. Incredible. Both said, listen to this next Gemara. This is pretty wild. Amar Ula, from Masnisa, Tana, Asara kosos tiknu chachamim bebeis ha'avel. Chazal instituted that you should drink 10 cups of wine in a base avel. Now, not everyone. You'll see again, Abba say it's actually referring to those partaking of a seuda in a base avel. Listen to this. Here we go. How do you get 10 cups of wine? Shlosha kodem achila, 3 cups before you eat. Kedei liftoach has been a meyav, because everyone knows you need 3 cups before the seuda to loosen up the kishkas, right? To go ahead and make sure that the food is able to take. Shlosha besoch achila kedei lishlos achila. You need 3 cups during the meal, in order to allow the food to soak right in your stomach. Next, va'arba la'achar achila. And then, of course, you need the 4 after the meal. Why 4 after the meal? It's not for you, it's for benching. Echad kineged hazon, ve'echad kineged birkas haaretz, ve'echad kineged bonei Yerushalayim, ve'echad kineged hatov ha'metiv. So you have 1 cup corresponding to each of the brachos of benching. So a total of 10 cups, 3 before you eat, 3 during the meal, and 4 corresponding to each of the brachos of benching. Get ready for this. Hosifu alehem arba. They decided to add on another 4 cups. Why 4 cups? Kineged chazon. It's actually very beautiful. Kineged chazoni ha'ir. 1 corresponding to the rose. Now, who are the chazanei? Look at Rashi. Kineged chazanei ha'ir. Tziknu lahem bracha alav lefisha yushamashi ha'ir lis asik b'meisim b'shar tzarech tzibor. Now, both say the chazanim are the gaboim. So they added on another cup for the gaboim. Now, both say, why the gaboim? Because the gaboim were the ones who often made the arrangements for the shiva home, the timing of the Levaya Avram. This cup is mamish for the gaboim, right? The gaboim were in charge of everything, so they made sure everything ran correctly in the kila. So 1 cup kineged the gaboim. Next, the echad kineged parnos yair, 1 for the gvirim, the wealthy individuals of the city. Now, we'll say beautiful. Look at Rashi. Parnos yair shayu ashirim mevazim mamorim lekvuras aniyim. We'll say this is beautiful. The wealthy people were often the ones who picked up the bill for the poor who were unable to afford burial expenses. Well, say, by the way, I will tell you, just because sometimes we don't appreciate the community that we live in. You know, we have one funeral home, Levinson's, and I will tell you, one of the incredible chasadim they do is that when there is someone who is unable to afford a levaya, they will pick up as much of the cost as they need to, which is, as someone who's lived in other communities, you do not find that. You'll find communities that fundraise for levayas, absolutely, but to have, again, it is definitely one of the perks of being a monopoly, Baruch Hashem. But lamaisa, it's an incredible thing. So in yesterday, you didn't have a funeral home like that. So who picked up the tab for the levayas? So the Ashirim, the Gvirim, the wealthy people of the community. So therefore, again, there was 1 cup for the wealthy people. Ve'echad kineged beis hamikdash, 1 cup for the beis hamikdash. Because I will say, now what does the beis hamikdash have to do with this? So I will say, look at Rashi. Tiknu alav birchas nichumim shinachmu hamakom bevinyanom me'avelu shalom b'salam. So I will say, it makes sense. Because remember, this is in a beis avel. So in a beis avel, where we're mourning over personal loss, we have another cup reminding us of the loss of the beis hamikdash. Next, the echad kineged Rebbe Gamliel. Both say 1 cup for Rebbe Gamliel. Now we'll see why that is. Both say, so now we'll say, in a Beis Aval, we've got 14 cups of wine. Right? So says the Gemara, shockingly, Hischilu hayu shosin umishtakrin. right? So we'll say, it turns out people started getting drunk, right? I know. Who would have thought? People starting, which obviously is never good, but certainly in a base avel is not good. Hechziru hadavar liyoshna. So they went back to the 10-cup model. Right? So we'll say, so apparently the 10-cup model worked. We'll say, also, all kidding aside, understand, wine consumption was very different, right? Wine was a regular staple drink at every single meal. So they went back to 10 cups, to which the Gemara says, my Rabbi Gamliel, what's the cup corresponding to Rabbi Gamliel? What is that about? So the Gemara will say, this is so beautiful. We saw this in Moed Katan, and it's so profound. Desanya, Barishona Haisal Tzas Hames, Kasha Likrovav Yoser Mimisaso. I will say, listen to this. It used to be that paying for funeral expenses was more painful than death itself. Meaning what Rabbi was saying, people used to make levayas like chasanas. Meaning what? You'd rent the hall, beautiful casket, nice tachrichim. You'd bring in you'd bring in a singer, right? Because also they used to have. So like the singers would do weddings and levayas, right? So in other words, it was like I guess you could buy a package maybe. Right? So Lamaisa, again, there was incredible financial pressure to put on a top-notch levaya, to the point that what happened? Listen to how profound this is. People would literally go ahead and leave the bodies of their loved ones by the side of the road, and they would run away. Now, both say, because what happens once the body is on the side of the road? What does it become? A meis mitzvah. Once it's a meis mitzvah, whoever finds it has. I say, I just want to point out. How profound this is. Most say, you say to yourself, that's crazy. I will say, is that any crazier than taking out a second mortgage to make a wedding? Is that any crazier than putting yourself in debt for 30 years to make a 5-hour event? Yet it's ma'asim b'chol yom that people put themselves into ridiculous debt to go to make a chasa. Again, let's say this is one of the things that we have to, if you have money and you want to make a beautiful thing, fantastic. But Lamaisa, that we've created a situation where people feel a social pressure to be able to put on simchas that they cannot afford is a terrible, terrible communal disservice that we have done to ourselves. This is not something new. This has been part of the story of the Jewish people, right? Apparently for a very long time. Achibar Rabbi Gamliel, v'nag kalos biatzmo. Rabbi Gamliel came along, and Abba say, what did he do? Nag kalos biatzmo. Nag kalos biatzmo means, Abba say, he arranged his own levaya, and he said, I'm having a very simple levaya. Votziel b'klei pishtan, and they went ahead and they took him out in simple linen tachrichim, simple linen shrouds. After he did it, everyone conducted themselves like this as well. Rav Papa says, that's why today Rabbi say we bury the dead even in a piece of canvas that's only worth a zuz. It happens we don't use canvas, we use linen shrouds. But Rabbi say the idea that contemporarily a levaya is the simplest of the simple. The simplest of the simple, a regular casket, if you use a casket, right? Regular shrouds, that's because of Rabbi Gamliel. I will say, by the way, and therefore they used to drink a cup, right? A l'chaim to Rabbi Gamliel, so to speak, for helping to affect change with better practice. I will say, but you see something incredible here. It's also an incredible din in leadership, which is that if you want to affect change, be the change. Be the agent of change. We often speak about change, and this should change, and that should change, and all this should change. But the only problem is we're willing to talk about it. We're just waiting for someone to be the actual agent of change. And I want to say what the Gemara, what Rabbi Gamliel teaches us is, be the change you want to see occur. Be the change. Be the agent of change. Be the vehicle of change. That's how you affect change. Obviously, Rabbi Gamliel has the position. Right? And Rabbi Gamliel has the power and the authority, and when he does something, people watch. Rabbi was saying, you'd be surprised, we all have a sphere of influence, and if we truly feel that certain change has to be made, be that change. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi say back to Kesuvos. Back to Kesuvos. Rabbi Lazar, HaOmer, top of Tess. HaOmer Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. Rabbi say a man marries a woman, and he says Pesach Pasuach. I found out, which means he's claiming there's no besulim. He's claiming there was no besulim. Rabbi say, look at Rashi. HaOmer Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. V'tainas tamim elo. The Rabbi say, in this case, he's not claiming that there was no dam. He's not claiming that there was no blood. Kigon shim mishpachas dorkiti she'in ladam besulim o shenev dam imenu mappa v'lo yadim hayadamim lav. So we'll say, so again, right now there's no claim of blood. For whatever the reason, we'll discuss maybe the sheet was lost, or we'll see that there were certain families that just did not have dam besulim, haimeno blood. So he's claiming Pesach pasuach matzasi. Literally, again, I found no besulim. Right? Ultimately, again, there was no blockage to penetration, and therefore halacha ma'aseh is claiming that she was not a basula. So the Gemara says, so ne'eman la'os shalav. Now both say he's believed to aser her upon him. Now understand what's happening over here. Now both say, is he believed to aser her status? Is he believed to aser her status? No, he's making a claim. Now what can he do? He's believed legabe himself. So essentially, he's making a claim. What's the claim he's making? You're not a basula. Implicit in that claim that he's making is what? You committed adultery. Now, both say he's not believed to label her an adulteress, right? That he's not believed. That's a claim that requires eidos. What he's saying is shavi anafshe chaticha di isura. You could make something prohibited to you, and you're believed. Legabe you look Rashi ne'emar on the osralav v'aval pishin adavar azeh yachal isbar ela al piv legabe nafshe havi mehemin l'shavi alei chaticha di isura. Aval see the Kesuvos lo mehemin. So both say he's believed to make her aser onto him. Okay, if you think she committed adultery, then she is asura to you. She's not chas v'shalom labeled as an adulteress. She's not going to go ahead and lose her ksuva. But there's a concept of shavi anafshe chaticha di isura. You can make something aser to you. So Gemara says va'amai, but why is that? Svek sveikahu. We'll say it should be a double suffix. What's the double suffix? Suffix tachtov, suffix in tachtov. So first of all, suffix number one, maybe she did have relations with someone else. But maybe it happened during Erisin. Maybe it happened before Erisin. And if it happened during Erisin, suffix ba'one, suffix baratzon. Maybe she was violated against her will. Maybe she was complicit. So because you have a svek sveik, I will say in general with a double suffix, we're generally able to be mekel. If that's the case, even if he claims Pesach, Pasuach, Matzasi, I found an opening, Lemaisa, again, she should still be permitted to him. Possibility number one is where he's a Kohen. So we'll say, remember again, a Kohen, his wife is asura to him if she has relations with another man, unfortunately, even if she's violated. So therefore, in that case, there would only be one suffix. V'baisema be'eshes Yisrael, ukigon dekabel be'avua, kidushin be'pchusa mibas gimel shana v'yom echad. So the other possibility is that maybe we're talking about a Yisrael, and we're talking about a young girl whose father accepted kiddushin for her less than 3 years old and 1 day. And let's say, by the way, I just want to point out because when we speak about these conversations about marrying a minor and the young girl, and the Gemara talking about having relations with a minor. Shabbos say, so obviously we read these things, and just to be honest, it's shocking to us. It's shocking to us, right? And it's overwhelming to us. And again, to be clear, obviously, from the lens in which we look at it, it's unequivocally, overwhelmingly, and undeniably wrong. Wrong, to be very clear. Obviously, the Gemara is dealing with a different system, a different societal system, just like we've seen the concept and construct of marriage is something fundamentally different. This notion of marriage at a young age, I will point out that if you remember again, we did see in Yevamis how the Gemara spoke about the idea that even if one is marrying a younger girl, one should not consummate that relationship until she becomes a bogeres. Granted, bogeres is 12 years old and 6 months. It's not like it, for our sensitivities, it's not like it fundamentally changes. But I just want to point out that Chazal had that sensitivity to a young girl as well, even though technically it might be permitted, but Lamaisa, they had that sensitivity. So I've had this conversation with a number of you offline. It's important to mention it because, again, we're learning it from the construct of Chazal, but it's important to acknowledge the fact that Lamaisa, obviously, contemporarily, this has fundamentally and wholly changed. It's important also to acknowledge that it's a bit shocking to our contemporary understandings and sensitivities to read things like this. But Lamaisa, Chazal shared that sensitivity that was reflective of their time. But Lamaisa, again, we're looking at a totally different construct. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, "My kamash malan." So fine, what are you teaching me? So Tanina, we learned this already. Ha'omer li'isha kidashticha v'omer lo kidashtani. If a man says to a woman, "You have betrothed," ha'omer li'isha, man says to a woman, "We're married." She says, "No, we're not." I've actually had couples in my office like this, right? Right, we're married, right? No, we're not. So here they have mamish, like here they're arguing about whether or not they're married. So what's the halacha? Sehimu taras bekravav v'hu asur bekravav. So we'll say it's interesting. So what's the halacha in this case? He can't marry any of her relatives, but she can marry his relatives. Meaning what? I will say. In other words, you can make a claim. But if you have an unsubstantiated claim, the only person that claim affects is who? Is you. Because there's a concept of shavi anaf shechatichidi. So I'll give you a perfect example. Right? I have a steak on the table. And I say, that steak is treif. And you say, I bought it from Wasserman. What are you talking about? I just bought it. So I'll say, what's the halacha? Right? Can you eat it? Absolutely. Absolutely. In other words, my claim doesn't have the ability to create a halachic reality for anyone beyond myself. So now what we're saying is, a guy says, Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. She's not a basula. Okay. She's not you're not bringing eidos. You're claiming she's not a basula. Okay, so effectively what's happened over here is, you've made this woman usher to you. You have it, right, legabe her, she gets her ksuva, she's a regular woman. You haven't changed your status. So is that what you're coming to teach us? If that's it, we've learned that before. So ma'adatema, hasam devadai kimle. So I'll say, you might have thought like this. When do we say shavia anaf shechaticha disura? In a situation where the man could be sure about his claim. Like where he claims, I married you. He's sure about that. Aval hacha meikam hu delo kamle. I will say, maybe in this case over here, in this case of Pesach Pasuach, I will say, here's what's going to be interesting about the case of Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. When a guy comes along and he says, Pesach Pasuach, right? There wasn't open, in other words, there was no Besulim. They will say, what do we say to him? We kind of give him a little bit of a look. And we say to him, how do you know? Right? In other words, what level of experience are you coming into this first interaction with that you know what this is supposed to feel like and what it's supposed to be like? So we kind of, how do we say, look at him askance, right? We give him a little bit of a look, wondering like, wow, you certainly have a lot of knowledge for someone who just got married and was supposedly in yeshiva this entire time, right? In other words, how do you know all of this exactly? It's a must have you learned Daf Yomi, you learned Kesuvos, right? Again, there's no pictures in the Gemara, right? So what exactly, right? So what exactly? So I will say, so the Gemara, and this is actually, all kidding aside, this is going to come up. So what the Gemara is pointing out over here is, maybe they claim that Pesach Pasuach, maybe we essentially tell them, listen, buddy, you don't know what you're talking about. You might think you know what you're talking about. You might think that you know what this is, what the resistance is supposed to be like. But Lamaisa, maybe what you're claiming is just not really true because you're not experienced enough to know what this is. So I will say, Kamash Malano, Kamash, look, if the guy makes the claim and he says, Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, at the end of the day, we accept his word for him. We're not going to accept his word for her. In other words, her status is not going to change. But look, you're claiming your wife is not a basula, which essentially is you're making a quasi-claim of adultery. She's a surah to you, but lamais, you have not changed her status. Umi Amar Rabbi Elazar Haki. Both say, did Rabbi Elazar actually say this? Ultimately, again, that a woman could become ne'eseres to her husband based on the statement of her husband, to which the was Rabbi Elazar, Eina isha ne'eseres al baila ela iske kinu yestira. Rabbi Elazar said the only way a woman becomes asura to her husband is through kinui and stira. Now, we're going to see this in Maseches Sota, right? Remember again, in Maseches Sota, we know that there's a concept. Kinui means a husband warns his wife not to be alone with a certain man. Stira, then what? She's alone with that man. And kinui and stira take place with the presence of Edom, with the presence of witnesses. So I will say, Rabbi Elazar said, a woman only becomes asura to her husband through kinui and stira. And like the event that occurred, I will say that is a reference to the event of David and Bathsheba. We'll discuss that. The Tizbara, one second, David and Bathsheba. The Tizbara, Maisa Shai B'Kinui Stir Hava. The Maisa of David and Bathsheba happened with kinui and stira. There was no kinoi and stira there. V'od mi asra. Furthermore, it was Batsheva asura to David, to which the Gemara says, no. Halo kasha. This is what it means to say. Here we go. Eina isha ne'asaras al baila, ela al iske kinoi stira. A woman only becomes asura to her husband if there's kinoi and stira, if there is warning and seclusion, in other words, warning about a particular man, and then seclusion with that very man. The Gemara says, ela iske kinoi stira. Mimaisa shahaya, and the proof you could bring to this is from the episode of David and Bathsheba, Delo hava kinoi stira, where there was no warning and seclusion. In other words, Uriah Hiti, Bathsheba's husband, never warned her, so to speak, about David HaMelech. V'lo isra, and therefore, again, ultimately, Bathsheba was not prohibited to David. And I will say, the story of David and Bathsheba is much more complex than what's being brought down over here, but we'll just go with it for now. So the Gemara says, Mika makom kasha. And I will say, here's our problem. We just said Rabbi Lazar saying that what? Homer Pesach Pasuach. Reuven comes to Beis Din. He marries Rachel. And he says, Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, which essentially means no besulim. What is he making? He's making a claim she must have committed adultery. What did Rabbi Lazar say? He's ne'eman la'osra alav. He's believed to make her Rachel asur to him. So now we have Rabbi Lazar saying the only way a woman becomes asura to her husband is how? Through kinui and stira. Okay, so I will say, so what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, Mikol makom kasha, kinui stira in, Pesach pasuach lo. Well, the tamech, kinui stira in, eidim lo. And here's the other problem. The other problem is, kinui and stira is clearly not the only way that a woman becomes asura to her husband, right? How else does a woman become asura to her husband? Ultimately, again, through eidim. Right? If you have testimony that a woman was mizana, that a woman committed adultery, that also prohibits. So kinui and stira is not the only mechanism. El hakikar, that's what it means to say. Here we go. Eina isha ne'aseres al baila be'ed echad, ela b'shnei eidim. A woman doesn't become asura to her husband through an eid echad. I will say, right? Let's say Reuven is married to Rachel. Eid echad shows up and says, I saw Rachel being mizana, having adultery with Shimon. Okay, not okay, but Lamaisa, it's an eid echad, it doesn't do anything. A woman only becomes asura to her husband with two eidim. Rabbi Lazar is coming to say is, Ukinu yestira afilu be'eid echad nami. Oh, so Rabbi say now when it comes to kinoi and stira, ultimately, Rabbi say, so we'll see this in Masechah Sota, but what the Gemara is suggesting is as follows. That halacha lamaisa, it could very well be that if a wife is warned in front of two witnesses, then if there's subsequent seclusion, even in the presence of Eid Echad, that could go ahead and answer her to her husband. Upesach pasuach kishnei eidim dami. Wow. And Rabbi Lazar will say that when a man makes a claim of Pesach pasuach is as powerful as a claim as two witnesses. Now I will say, to be clear, when we say that Pesach pasuach is like two witnesses, the only person Pesach Pasuach impacts is who? The husband. Because remember, again, Abosai, Shavi Anafshe Chaticha Di Isura. Right? The husband has the ability to go ahead and Halacha Lamaisa answer something upon himself. But the claim of Pesach Pasuach is like two witnesses. So the Gemara says, V'chi Tema, Ma'isa Shem Ne'ma Lo Asra. So we'll say, if that's the case, then when David had relations with Bathsheba, she was technically still married to Uriah Hiti. If that's the case, why wasn't Bathsheba asura to David? Why wasn't she asura to David? To which the Gemara says, okay, fine. Why wasn't she asura to David? Hasam ones haba. The Rabbi say Bathsheba was taken against her will. Right? She was summoned by the king. She didn't really have a say in what is it that occurred. I will say, now, by the way, whether or not the act of relations, she was compliant in the act of relations, the point over here is the entire Maisa, right? She was summoned by David HaMelech. She was summoned by the king. When you're summoned by the king, there's not really much of a choice. So it was against her will. Furthermore, Yonas, this is very interesting. Amud Beis, call Hayotze L'Melchames Beis David, get Krisus Kosev L'Ishto. I will say this is fascinating. The other possibility, I will say, and this is a very interesting technical answer. David HaMelech, as we're going to see, instituted a very interesting practice. That when his soldiers went out to war, before they went out to war, every soldier gave his wife a get. Now, what it was like a conditional get. And it was the type of get that says, if I don't come back from battle after a certain amount of time, I don't come back by so-and-so date or by so-and-so time after the war. So ultimately, again, this get is chal. This get takes effect retroactively. I will say, what's the godless of that? You prevent any type of aguna situations. You have to imagine, like in the wars of yesteryear, every war brought aguna situations with it, right? Every single war. So Lamai said this was an incredible eitzah to prevent aguna situations in the aftermath of battle. Kayotze l'milchames beis David get krisos kosev leishto. Now I will say, now how does this help? Because I will say, remember again, Uriah Hiti, who was Bathsheba's husband at the time that David sent for her, dies at the end of the story. So I will say, the fact that he dies in battle at the end of the story. The fact that Uriah died, he fell at the end of the battle, means that what? The get was triggered retroactively, which means that on a technical level, when David was with Bathsheba, she was no longer a married woman. Now I will say, I just want to be clear. David is held accountable for this Aveira. The difference just is on a technical level, it wasn't adultery. Again, was it a chait? Absolutely. That's why the Gemara says, Kala Omer David Chata Eina Elatoa. If you say that David HaMelech sinned, you're making a mistake. In other words, if you say that David HaMelech committed adultery, that's factually incorrect. That's actually incorrect. Did David HaMelech make a mistake? I will say, the baby died. The baby that he had with Bathsheba died. He's given 3 different punishments. The baby dies, he's stricken with illness, and there's going to be a rebellion from within his home. Avshalom. That's what the Navi says. And the Navi says all 3 of these things are because of what you did with Bathsheba. David HaMelech also becomes the paradigm of tshuva, because when David is confronted by Nasan HaNavi about what he did, what did David HaMelech do? He becomes the paradigmatic example of tshuva. Chatasi le'elokim. He owns it. David HaMelech is the quintessential, paradigmatic Baal Tshuva. Because I will say, both of us, when confronted with something we did wrong, usually do what? There's a whole process, right? There's denial, right? And then after denial, right, there's ultimately, again, rationalization. After rationalization, there's quasi-acceptance, or I should say first, then there's denial, there's rationalization, there's blame, quasi-acceptance. Sometime later on, right, there's some level of acceptance. David HaMelech, out of the gate, he's confronted, chatasi, I did it, I'm sorry, I owned it. He is the quintessential Baal Tshuva. So I will say, so therefore the Gemara says, but because technically Bathsheba wasn't married, because there was a retroactive get, therefore she was not asura to David HaMelech. I will say, by the way, where did David get this idea from? To go ahead and institute a get for every soldier who goes out to war. This is actually very interesting. Dichsiv, second line, Testament base, Dichsiv, Ves Achecha, Tifko l'Shalom. I will say the pasuk over here, the Gemara is quoting, is from Shmuel Aleph. Ves Achecha, Tifko l'Shalom. So I will say this is during the war with Goliath, during the war with Goliath. David is just a kid. He's not in the army. He's a shepherd. So Yishai, David's father, sends him to his brothers, who are all valiant generals. Go out to your brothers. Go see how your brothers are doing. Ve'es arubasam tikach. Take their aruba. So the Gemara says, "My ve'es arubasam tikach." What's arubasam? Tana Rabbi Yosef, dvarim ha'meuravim beino lebeina. Take the things that connect your brothers to their wives. Take their kiddushin, and have them write a get for their wives. So I will say, David was instructed as a young boy by his father Yishai to go to his brothers and tell their brothers in the name of the father, each of you write a get for your wife in the event that you don't come back from battle. So David saw this practice with his brothers and with his father. And what did David do when he became king and now commander-in-chief of the armed forces? Institutionalized this practice. Whoever goes out to war ultimately gives a get to his wife. I'll tell you something absolutely beautiful. The Kotzker, Zechus Yagin Aleinu, says something amazing. He says, what's the pshat? He says, Kala Yotzi L'Mochames Beis David, get krisos kosei. Whoever goes ahead and goes out to war, the Melchemes based David, anyone who went out to war of David HaMelech, gives a get to his wife. So the Kotzker says, everyone thinks about this from the vantage point of the wife. Right? Now, what's the goal of it? To prevent aguna. The Kotzker says there's another reason. There's another reason why. When you go out to battle, you have to have your mind on one thing and one thing only, which is what? The battle. So the Kotzker says it's actually profound. Giving a get to your wife before you went ahead and went out to war was also compartmentalizing your family. That it was saying to your wife, for the next little bit, when I go out on the battlefield, I'm not thinking about you. I love you. I'm not thinking about you. Because if I think about you, I'm not thinking about the battle. If I think about you, I'm not thinking about my fellow in arms. If I think about you, I'm not thinking about the enemy. So the Kotzker says, giving a get, ultimately, again, was a way of also allowing the soldier to have singular focus on the matter at hand. And I was thinking about this Kotzker, and what an incredible idea, because the Kotzker is also giving us the recipe to success. That sometimes in order to be successful in life, there has to be tunnel vision. You know, we speak about tunnel vision as being a bad thing, and sometimes it is. But sometimes in order to be successful in life, you have to have precision focus on what it is that you want to accomplish. And sometimes what that means is, doesn't mean giving a get to your wife. I just want to be clear, right? But sometimes, and it doesn't mean not taking her calls either. And that's not a marriage thing. I mean that sometimes what it means is you have to shut other stuff out. And sometimes it's difficult because the other stuff is important also. And if you think about it in life, on any given day, there's a whole bunch of important stuff. But at almost all times, there's the one thing that's most important that has to get done. There's the one thing that's most important that really rises above everything else. And the problem I will say is, often in life, I'm trying to accomplish a whole number of important things simultaneously. And so you can get some things done, but it doesn't get done in the right way. If you have a Melchemes-based David, and that's your primary objective, and you have to go to war, and you have to be successful, get krisus kosev leishto. You have to give a get krisus. You have to give a get to everything else in life. You have to take to everything else in life. You're important, you're important, you're important, you're important. You're not important now. You're not right now, this is the thing I need to focus on. I will say, by the way, and the right now might be for an hour, right? It might be for a day. It might be for a week. But in times in life when I have to be successful, there has to be the singular focus, and the get krisos has to be given to everything else. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Af ananami tanino. We also learn this. We'll say, here we go. Incredible Gemara. Af ananami tanino. Besula nisis lima revi. Besula gets married on a Wednesday. So the Gemara says, Lioma revi ilima chamishilo. Besula only gets married on a Wednesday, not on a Thursday. So we'll say, opening Mishnah on Kesuvos. So my taima, what's the reason for that? Mishum ikruri daita. Because we'll say, we saw in the first Mishnah, what are we concerned about? We're concerned that aloha lamaisa, if the wedding night comes, he finds that she's not a basula, what's going to happen? We want him to be able to go to Beis in the next morning. If halacha lamaisa, again, there's time between the wedding night and the next time Beis is in session, ikrure daita, literally, again, he's going to cool down. We spoke about this on the opening daf. People have a way of just becoming resigned to certain things. Sensitivities are dulled. He's going to accept this reality. So the Gemara says, ulamai. What are we? Let's drill down. But what are we concerned about? Ilameisiv laksuva. If we're nervous that Lamaisi is going to give her the ksuva property, in other words, we'll say, what are we concerned about? That come the wedding night, he's going to give her ksuva property, because we'll say, by the way, sometimes you could have, we're not used to this model, but you could have a situation like this where upon marriage, husband gives his wife the property that is representative of the ksuva. So right, he gives, in other words, why would a man do this? We'll say, because remember again, if you're a husband, anything and everything you own and will ever own is encumbered by the ksuva. Which is difficult because Lamaisa, if you want to transact business with other properties, you want to have lien-free properties. What you could do as a husband is ultimately designate what we call an apotekai, right? Which means I can give my wife an item and I could say, I love you, here's your ksuva, right? I hope you don't collect it until 120, right? But Lamaisa, here's anything and everything you will ever need to satisfy that ksuva debt, and that is potentially able to lift it. So what are we concerned about? I'm not saying that's the case. What are we concerned about? That he gave her the ksuva on the night of the wedding, and that's what? Now he's going to go to Beis Din a couple of days later, and he's not. Is that what we're concerned about? So the Gemara says, The Gemara says, Neisavla, who cares? That's just money. That's just money. Ela la osra alav. We'll say, no, what we're concerned about is that if the wedding night comes, and if he finds that she's not a basula, and then Lamaisa again, we need him to go to Beis Din to be mavara that. And if Beis Din is not open for a little while, he may just say, forget it. Forget it, let's just move on. V'dikatan taina. So we'll say he's making a taina. What's the taina? My love, dikatan taina's pesach pasuach. I will say, is he not making? In other words, what is the taina, right? What is our Mishnah? When our Mishnah says we want you to get married on the Wednesday, so that if something's wrong, you can go to Beis Din Thursday morning. What's the thing that's wrong? Is it not talking about a case of Pesach Pasuach? Isn't that the claim? Lo dikaton tainas damim. No. The Mishnah is saying over here, what is he making? Look at Rashi, right across in Rashi, tainas damim. The taina meburerasi. He's making a taina that there was no blood from the Bia Rishona. There was no blood. They will say, no. Our Mishnah is talking about a claim where he's making the claim there was no blood from the Bia Rishona. They will say, but a claim of Pesach Pasuach, that's not our Mishnah. Why not? I will say this goes back to the thing we said before. Because Pesach Pasuach is an uncertain claim. Why is it an uncertain claim? Because we could attribute that to his novice intimacy level, right? We could say, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because you don't have experience in this area of life. That's why what he's making over here is a definitive claim. There was no blood. That's a definitive claim. Pesach Pasuach, however, may not be a definitive claim. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, Har Pesach Pasuach Matzasi Nema Lafsi the Kesuvos. So Rabbi Yehuda comes along in the name of Shmuel. So we'll say, so where we're holding right now is we have Rabbi Lazar saying that if you claim Pesach Pasuach, he is believed to aser his wife upon himself. We're just challenging that a little bit because Lemaisa, our Mishnah doesn't seem to be talking about Pesach Pasuach. Our Mishnah is talking about where after the Bia Rishona, there's no blood. There's no blood. So he's coming to Beis and saying, listen, I don't know what, I'm just telling you, there was no blood from the Bia Rishona. What is that? What is that? But it could be that according to our Mishnah, if he were to claim with Pesach Pasuach, we kind of pat him on the back, put our arm around his shoulder, and say, you're a little new to this, right? So Lemaisa, right, go home, everything is fine. Everything is fine. So I will say we just have no raya from the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, let's go weiter. I will say for another minute, let's go weiter. So the Gemara says, Shmuel, now I'll say we just took it up a notch. If a man says Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, he is believed to deprive his wife of a ksuva. Now I will say, now this is strong. Now this is much stronger. Why is this much stronger? Because up until now, what we were saying is Pesach Pasuach at most has the ability to what? To aser her onto him, to change his status regarding her. Now we're saying Pesach Pasuach even has the ability to aser her in her ksuva. Rav Yosef, my kamashra, when we learn this, Tanina, we learn this. We'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up with this case, a great case. Shall we say? Our first week of Kesuvos, incredible, overwhelming, fantastic, beautiful. Shkoyach and a good Erev Shabbos, everyone.